The old ship groaned as it pushed through the darkness of space. Its hull, marked with patches of newer metal among the old, told stories of countless repairs. The HMS Steadfast was far from the gleaming vessels that made up the rest of the Terran fleet. While other ships boasted smooth lines and glowing energy weapons, the Steadfast still carried traditional railguns and ballistic weaponry that most considered outdated. Captain Thomas Reed stood at the bridge window, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the stars drift by. 25 years of service had left streaks of gray in his dark hair, but his eyes remained sharp as they scanned the sector his ship was assigned to patrol. It was quiet out here, far from the front lines where humanity fought against the Bright Horizon Collective. That's all his ship was good for these days. Patrol duty in empty space. Another thrilling day in the back end of nowhere. Weapons Officer James Cooper said from his station, his voice carrying a hint of frustration. He was young, barely 30, and Reed could sense his officer's desire for action. "Quiet is good," Reed replied, turning to face his bridge crew. "Quiet means our colonists are safe." He walked over to Cooper's station, glancing at the sensor readings. All clear, as usual. The captain had learned to appreciate these peaceful moments, especially with the war going badly for humanity in other sectors. The ship's intercom crackled to life. "Engineering to bridge." Maria Wells' voice was calm, but carried an edge of concern that made Reed straighten up. "Captain, I need you down here. There's something you should see." Reed exchanged glances with Cooper before heading to the lift. "Keep our eyes sharp up here," he ordered as the doors closed. The trip down to engineering was quick, but Reed felt every vibration, every small shudder of his aging ship. He knew the Steadfast's every sound, every quirk, like a rider knows their horse. Engineering was a maze of pipes, conduits, and machinery that looked more at home in a museum than a warship. Wells stood at her main console, her dark hair tied back messily as she pored over readouts. Unlike the sleek holographic displays on modern ships, the Steadfast still used physical screens and buttons. She looked up as Reed approached. "Captain, remember those power fluctuations we've been tracking in the main railgun systems?" Wells pulled up a diagram on her screen. "I think I know what's causing them. And it's not what we thought." Reed leaned in to study the display. Unlike most of his crew, who saw the Steadfast's old technology as a burden, Wells had always shown genuine interest in understanding how everything worked. "Show me," he said. "The fluctuations aren't a malfunction," Wells explained, her fingers dancing across the controls. "They're a harmonic resonance created by the interaction between our railgun's magnetic field and the new quantum shielding systems installed during our last refit." She pulled up another screen showing wave patterns. "Look at these frequencies." Reed studied the patterns, but engineering wasn't his specialty. "What am I looking at, Wells?" "Our railguns are creating quantum interference patterns," she said, excitement creeping into her voice. "The same kind of patterns that the Bright Horizons ships use in their shield systems. Captain, I think our obsolete weapons might actually be able to affect their defenses in ways their engineers never considered." Before Reed could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Cooper's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, to the bridge. We got company." Reed and Wells shared a look before he hurried back to the lift. When he reached the bridge, Cooper was already pulling up sensor data. "Bright Horizon patrol ship," Cooper reported. "Light cruiser class. They're staying just outside standard sensor range." "They're testing our response," Reed said, settling into his command chair. "Standard patrol pattern. Let's not give them anything unusual to report." The bridge crew worked efficiently, maintaining their course while keeping tabs on the alien vessel. The Bright Horizon ship was beautiful in a deadly way, all smooth curves and glowing energy nodes. Next to it, the Steadfast must have looked like space debris. "They're scanning us," Cooper reported, getting a lot of attention for an obsolete patrol ship. Reed watched the alien vessel on the main screen. "They're probably wondering why we're still using a ship this old," he said with a slight smile. "Let them think we're harmless." Pride comes before the fall. Hours passed as the two ships maintained their distance. The Bright Horizon cruiser eventually departed, apparently satisfied that the old human vessel posed no threat. Only then did Reed allow himself to relax slightly. "Cooper, I want you to work with Wells on something," Reed said after the alien ship was gone. "She's found an interesting quirk in our weapons systems. Could be nothing, but I want it investigated." "Sir," Cooper looked confused. "Our weapons systems are ancient. What could possibly be interesting about them?" Reed smiled. "Sometimes the old ways have advantages we've forgotten. And right now, we need every advantage we can get." He turned to face his weapons officer fully. "The Bright Horizon thinks they know everything about us. They see our older technology and dismiss it. That's their weakness." Later that night, Reed sat in his quarters, reviewing Wells' initial findings. The engineering officer had already compiled an impressive amount of data on the harmonic interactions she discovered. If she was right, the Steadfast's railguns might be capable of something revolutionary. He pulled up the latest fleet reports on his tablet. The news wasn't good. The Bright Horizon was pushing further into human space every day, their advanced shields making them nearly invulnerable to modern energy weapons. The Terran fleet's newest ships, for all their technological advancement, were struggling to make a dent in the alien defenses. Reed looked out his small window at the stars beyond. The Steadfast had been his home for 5 years now. Ever since the Admiralty had decided he was better suited to quiet patrol duty than frontline command. They'd given him an old ship because they thought both he and the vessel were past their prime. But Reed knew better. He'd served through 3 wars, commanded 6 ships, and learned one crucial lesson. It's not the shine of the weapon that matters, but the wisdom to know how to use it. The Steadfast might be old, but age brought with it experience and hidden strengths. He opened a new message window and began composing a report to Fleet Command about Wells' discovery. He already knew what would happen. They would dismiss it as the desperate theories of a crew assigned to an obsolete ship, but he would document everything anyway. Someday they might need this information. As he wrote, the Steadfast continued its patrol through the quiet sector of space, its ancient engines humming steadily. To anyone watching, it was just another outdated ship assigned to a backwater post. But within its worn hull, something revolutionary was brewing, a discovery that would soon shake the very foundations of the war. Reed finished his report and sent it, knowing it would likely be filed away and forgotten. That was fine. Let them underestimate the Steadfast. Let them think its age made it weak. Soon enough, they would all learn what this old ship and her crew were truly capable of. 3 days had passed since Maria Wells' discovery, and she hadn't slept much since then. The engineering bay had become her second home, filled with scattered data pads and cold cups of coffee. James Cooper stood beside her, watching as she made another adjustment to the railgun's power settings. "Run the simulation again," Wells said, pushing her tired eyes. The computer churned through the calculations, its older processors working harder than their modern counterparts would have needed to. Cooper leaned in as the results appeared on the screen. "That's the 3rd successful test," he said, unable to hide his excitement. "The frequency matching is perfect. These readings suggest we could disrupt their shield harmonics by at least 60%. Wells nodded, but kept typing. "The theory works in simulation, but we need real-world data. Without knowing the exact frequencies of their shield systems, we're just guessing." The ship's intercom buzzed. "Engineering, this is the captain. Status report." "Sir," Wells responded, "we've confirmed the theory in simulation. The railgun's magnetic field can be tuned to create destructive interference patterns in quantum shield systems. But," she hesitated, "we need more data on their actual shield frequencies to make it work." "Understood." Reed's voice carried a note of consideration. "Both of you, come to my ready room. Bring your findings." Minutes later, they sat across from Captain Reed as he reviewed their data. The ready room was small, like everything else on the Steadfast, but it felt comfortable, lived in. A model of the ship sat on Reed's desk, its paint slightly chipped. "So," Reed said, looking up from the reports, "we have a weapon that might work, but we need to scan their shields up close to get the right frequencies." "Yes, sir," Cooper answered. "We'd need to be within standard combat range, and we'd have to get them to power up their shields fully. The scan would take about 30 seconds. Reed leaned back in his chair. 30 seconds is a long time in a fight, especially against their technology. "Sir," Wells leaned forward, "I know it's risky, but this could change everything. Their quantum shields have made them nearly invincible against our energy weapons, but they've never had to defend against something like this. They don't even think about kinetic weapons anymore." A message alert flashed on Reed's desk screen. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. "Fleet Command responded to our report," he said. "They're not interested in pursuing the theory. They say we should focus on our patrol duties and leave weapons development to the research division." Wells felt her heart sink, but Cooper spoke up. "With all due respect to Fleet Command, sir, they're wrong. We've proved the concept works. We just need a chance to test it." Reed stood and walked to his window, watching the stars streak by. "The problem is, Fleet Command thinks the future is in energy weapons. They've invested everything in trying to overpower the Bright Horizons shields. The idea that an old railgun might do what their newest weapons can't. It doesn't fit their worldview." The ship suddenly shuddered slightly, and a moment later, the alert system activated. "Bridge to Captain." The watch officer's voice came through. "We're picking up unusual energy readings from the nearby asteroid field." All three of them hurried to the bridge. The main screen showed a cluster of asteroids about 50,000 kilometers away, with strange energy fluctuations appearing between the rocks. "Analysis?" Reed asked, settling into his command chair. "It looks like some kind of cloaking field failing," Cooper said from his station. "Sir, I think someone's been watching us." As if on cue, a Bright Horizons scout ship shimmered into view, its cloaking device malfunctioning. The alien vessel was smaller than the cruiser they'd seen days ago, but still deadly. "They must have been monitoring our tests," Wells said quietly. Reed's voice remained calm. "Battle stations. Power up weapons, but do not target them yet." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, even as old systems whirred to life around them. The scout ship, perhaps realizing it had been spotted, began moving toward them. Its sleek form seemed to mock the Steadfast's aged appearance. "They're scanning us," Cooper reported. "Getting the same readings as before. They're focusing on our weapon systems." Reed nodded slowly. "They saw our tests. They're trying to figure out what we were doing." He turned to Wells. "How long would you need to get good readings of their shield frequencies?" 30 seconds, sir, but they'd have to have their shields at full power." A small smile crossed Reed's face. "Cooper, load the railguns with practice rounds. Power them up to full, but keep them slightly out of alignment with Wells' modifications." "Sir," Cooper looked confused. "They want to know what we're up to. Let's give them a show. Make it look like we're having trouble with our weapons, like we can't quite get them working right." Understanding dawned on Wells' face. "We let them think we're struggling with malfunctioning equipment, and they'll stick around to gather intelligence." Reed finished. "Their pride won't let them pass up a chance to study what they think is a failed experiment." The next 20 minutes were tense. The Steadfast made a show of powering up its railguns, then powering them down, as if running tests. The Bright Horizons scout ship moved closer, its own shields raised as it observed. "They're at optimal scanning range," Wells reported from her jerry-rigged scanning station. "Their shields are at full power. They're taking no chances with us." "Cooper," Reed said quietly, "on my mark, I want you to fire a single practice round. Make it look like an accident. Wells, be ready with your scans." The bridge crew held their breath. The scout ship hovered nearby, its sensors probing the Steadfast's systems. "Now," Reed ordered, Cooper fired. The practice round, harmless though it was, streaked toward the alien ship. As expected, they easily deflected it with their shields. "Scans coming in," Wells said excitedly. "Their shield frequencies are clear as day. They're exactly where we thought they'd be in the quantum spectrum. Sir, we were right." The alien ship, apparently satisfied that the Steadfast's weapons were no threat, began to turn away. They transmitted a message in the common trade language. "Your weapons malfunction is noted. Recommend immediate return to port for repairs." Reed waited until they were gone before allowing himself to smile. "Wells, Cooper, how long will it take to calibrate our railguns to those frequencies?" "A few hours, sir," Wells answered. "We'll need to adjust the magnetic coils precisely, but now we know exactly what we're aiming for." "Get to work," Reed ordered, "and keep it quiet. As far as anyone else is concerned, we're still having technical difficulties." He looked at the star chart where the scout ship had disappeared. "They think they caught us testing a failed weapon. Their overconfidence is going to cost them dearly." As Wells and Cooper hurried back to engineering, Reed sent a final message to Fleet Command, officially reporting the weapons malfunction and requesting maintenance at their next port call. Let the Bright Horizon think they had nothing to fear from this old ship. Let them think the Steadfast was just another relic, struggling to keep its outdated weapons working. Soon enough, they would learn just how dangerous underestimating this ship and her crew could be. The real test was coming, and the Steadfast would be ready. The alarms blared through the Steadfast's corridors without warning. Captain Reed was in engineering, reviewing the latest adjustments to the railgun systems, when the call came from the bridge. "Captain, emergency transmission from Fleet Command." The watch officer's voice was tight with tension. "The Bright Horizon has launched a major offensive. They've broken through our lines at Thompson's Gate." Reed was already moving, with Wells close behind him. They reached the bridge just as the tactical display updated, showing a massive fleet of enemy ships pushing through humanity's defensive line. The main screen filled with emergency broadcasts from civilian ships fleeing the attack. How did they get past our early warning systems? Cooper asked from his station, hands flying over the controls. "They didn't," Reed said grimly, studying the tactical display. "They went through them. Look at the debris fields." The screen showed the scattered remains of human sensor platforms and patrol ships. "They knew exactly where to hit us." "Sir," the communications officer called out, "I'm getting distress calls from the Palmer Colony Evacuation Fleet. They're trying to escape through our sector, but their escorts were pulled away to defend the main line." Reed's jaw tightened. The Palmer Colony held over 50,000 civilians. If the Bright Horizon fleet caught them, he turned to Wells. "Are the railgun modifications ready?" "Yes, sir. We've calibrated them to match the frequencies we recorded from the scout ship, but we haven't had a chance to test them in actual combat conditions." "Sir," Cooper's voice cut through the tension, "long-range sensors are picking up a large force of Bright Horizon ships. They're on an intercept course with the Palmer Evacuation Fleet. Time to intercept, 40 minutes. Reed stood at the center of his bridge, feeling the weight of command more heavily than ever before. The tactical display told a clear story. The Steadfast was the only military ship within range of the civilian fleet. Their orders were clear: patrol ships were to avoid engagement with major enemy forces and retreat to designated rally points. "How many ships in the enemy force?" Reed asked quietly. Cooper swallowed hard before answering. 15 vessels, sir. 2 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and 5 escort ships. They're moving fast." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what those numbers meant. Even with their modified weapons, the Steadfast was just one aging destroyer going up against an Armada. "Sir," the communications officer spoke up, "Fleet Command is ordering all patrol ships to fall back to Defense Point Delta. They're writing off this sector." Reed walked to the main viewport, watching the stars. Behind those stars were 50,000 civilians running for their lives. He thought about Fleet Command, about their dismissal of Wells' discovery, about their focus on newer and flashier technology. Plot an intercept course with the enemy fleet, Reed ordered. The bridge crew looked at him in shock. Cooper was the first to speak. "Sir, those orders." "I know what the orders say." Reed turned to face his crew. "I also know what's at stake. 50,000 civilians who won't stand a chance if we run." He looked at each of them in turn. "I won't order any of you to disobey a direct command. If you want to take a shuttle to the rally point, I'll understand." Wells stepped forward first. "My railgun modifications. My place is here." "The weapons don't work without a targeting system," Cooper added with a slight smile. "I'm staying." One by one, the bridge crew voiced their support. Reed felt a surge of pride in his people. This was why the old ships were special. Their crews learned to trust each other, to become family. "Plot a course that puts us between the enemy fleet and the civilian ships," Reed ordered. "Engineering. Divert all spare power to the railgun systems." "Cooper, I want firing solutions ready the moment they come in range." The Steadfast's engines pushed to full power, its old frame shuddering with the effort. On the tactical display, the red dots of the enemy fleet grew closer. The blue dots of the civilian ships were moving as fast as they could, but they were slow, vulnerable. "Sir," Cooper reported, "enemy fleet is launching scout drones. They'll have visual contact in 5 minutes." "Let them look," Reed said. "Let them see exactly what's coming for them. An old ship with outdated weapons. Their pride won't let them turn away from such an easy target." Wells worked at her station, monitoring the railgun modifications. "Power levels are holding steady, sir. The frequency matching is perfect. If this works." "When this works," Reed corrected her, "we just have to hold them long enough for the civilian ships to escape." The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. The enemy fleet grew larger on their screens, their sleek ships gleaming with deadly purpose. The Steadfast must have looked like space debris to them, a single ancient vessel daring to challenge their might. "They're broadcasting, sir," the communications officer reported. "They're ordering us to stand down or be destroyed." No response. Reed ordered, "Let them think our communications are as outdated as everything else." He turned to his crew. "This is the moment, people. Everything we've worked for comes down to the next few minutes. Whatever happens, I want you to know how proud I am of this crew." The first enemy shots would come soon. Reed could almost feel the Bright Horizon commanders' amusement at this lone, outdated ship challenging their fleet. They would expect an easy victory, a moment's diversion before continuing their pursuit of the civilian vessels. "All hands," Reed's voice carried through the ship's intercom. "Battle stations. This old girl has one more fight in her, and it's going to be one for the history books." The Steadfast's engines pushed harder, driving the ship toward its date with destiny. Behind them, 50,000 civilians prayed for a miracle. Ahead of them, an enemy fleet approached, confident in their superior technology and overwhelming numbers. They had no idea what was coming. The first shots from the Bright Horizon fleet lit up space like artificial stars. Their energy weapons were beautiful in a deadly way. The Steadfast's older engines growled as Reed ordered evasive maneuvers, avoiding the initial barrage. "They're trying to bracket us," Cooper called out from his station. "Standard containment pattern. They think we'll run." Reed allowed himself a small smile. "That's their first mistake." "Wells, are the railguns ready?" "Yes, sir. Frequency matching is locked in. We'll only get one chance at this. They'll adapt once they realize what we're doing." The enemy fleet spread out in a classic attack formation. Their 2 heavy cruisers held back, letting their destroyers move forward to deal with what they surely saw as a minor annoyance. The Steadfast must have looked pathetic to them, an ancient vessel with visible repair patches along its hull. "Let them get closer," Reed ordered. "Wait for my mark." His crew trusted him, holding their positions even as the enemy ships closed in. The first destroyer was now less than 10,000 kilometers away, its quantum shields glowing with confidence. "Sir," the sensor officer reported, They're powering up their main weapons. All ships are bringing their shields to maximum power. Perfect, Reed said quietly. That's their second mistake. Cooper, target the nearest destroyer. Wells, initiate the frequency pulse. The Steadfast's railguns hummed to life, their magnetic coils spinning up to full power. The enemy destroyer's captain must have been surprised to see such an antiquated weapon system activating. Perhaps they were even laughing. Fire. The first shot streaked across space. A simple metal slug accelerated to incredible speed. The destroyer didn't even try to dodge, trusting its quantum shields to handle such primitive weaponry. Then the impossible happened. The projectile passed through the shield as if it wasn't there, its specially tuned magnetic field creating a perfect disruption in the quantum barrier. The slug slammed into the destroyer's hull, ripping through armor designed to deflect energy weapons, but vulnerable to good old-fashioned kinetic impact. Direct hit, Cooper shouted. Their shields are. They're completely down. The destroyer listed to one side, emergency systems flaring. The rest of the enemy fleet seemed to pause in shock. Reed didn't give them time to recover. Target the next ship. Fire at will. The Steadfast's railguns roared again and again. Each shot was precisely calibrated to match the frequency of the enemy shields, each impact devastating. 2 more destroyers fell before the Bright Horizon fleet realized the true danger they faced. They're changing formation, Cooper reported with grim satisfaction, breaking up their tight groups. They didn't expect to need point defense against ballistic weapons. The enemy fleet's confidence had turned to confusion. Their return fire became erratic as ship after ship found their supposedly impenetrable shields useless against the Steadfast's attacks. The old destroyer danced between their energy beams, its experienced crew using their ship's smaller size to their advantage. The heavy cruisers are moving in, Wells warned. They're adapting their shield frequencies. Reed nodded. As expected, Cooper switched to scattershot pattern. Wells begin random frequency modulation. The Steadfast's next volley split into multiple projectiles, each tuned to a slightly different frequency. The heavy cruiser's shields caught some, but others slipped through, causing damage across their hulls. Not as devastating as direct hits, but enough to keep them off balance. Sir, the communications officer called out. The civilian ships report they're almost at the jump point, 10 more minutes. Enemy destroyers regrouping, Cooper warned. They're trying to flank us. Reed studied the tactical display. 4 enemy destroyers were already disabled or destroyed, but the remaining ships were adapting their tactics. They'd lost the advantage of surprise, and now the real test would begin. Bring us about, Reed ordered. Full power to forward shields. Wells, divert auxiliary power to the railgun cooling systems. We're going straight through their line. The Steadfast turned to face the enemy formation head-on. It was a move so aggressive, so seemingly suicidal, that it caught the Bright Horizon ships off guard. They'd expected the human vessel to keep trying to evade. Multiple enemy locks, Cooper shouted. Energy weapons charging. Hold course, Reed commanded. The enemy fire came in a devastating wave, but Reed had counted on their anger, their wounded pride. Their shots were powerful but predictable. The Steadfast slipped through gaps in their fire, its old hull groaning with the strain of high-G maneuvers. Port railgun ready, Wells reported. Target the lead cruiser's command section, Reed ordered. Fire when ready. The shot caught the cruiser's captain by surprise. They'd been so focused on hitting the Steadfast with their energy weapons that they'd let their shield frequencies stabilize. The railgun round punched through their weakened defenses and struck their bridge directly. The massive cruiser's lights flickered and died, its systems failing as emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout its hull. The second cruiser broke formation, trying to maintain distance from the seemingly primitive vessel that had just crippled its flagship. 5 minutes until the civilian ships jump, communications reported. Enemy fleet is falling back, Cooper added. They're "They're retreating, sir." But Reed saw something in the tactical display that made his blood run cold. "No, they're not retreating. They're clearing a firing lane. All hands, brace for impact." The second cruiser had moved to a position where the Steadfast couldn't reach it with a direct shot. Its main gun, a massive energy weapon that ran the length of the ship, began to glow with gathered power. "Evasive maneuvers," Reed ordered, but he knew they couldn't dodge this shot. The cruiser had timed it perfectly, waiting until the Steadfast was committed to its attack run. "Impact in 3 seconds," Cooper shouted. "Divert all power to starboard shields." The energy beam struck the Steadfast like the fist of an angry god. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship as systems overloaded. On the bridge, displays exploded in showers of sparks. "Hull breach on decks 3 and 4, damage control reported. Emergency containment holding." Through the chaos, Wells' voice cut through. "Railguns still operational, sir. Cooling systems damaged, but functioning." Reed pulled himself back to his command chair, ignoring the blood running down his face from a cut caused by flying debris. "Cooper, do you have a firing solution on that cruiser?" "Yes, sir, but our shot will be weak without full power to the magnetic coils." "It doesn't need to be strong," Reed said. "It just needs to be precise. Wells, forget the cooling. Divert all remaining power to the coils. 1 shot. Make it count." The Steadfast's railgun fired one last time. The projectile seemed to move in slow motion across space, its magnetic field precisely tuned to the cruiser's shield frequency. The enemy captain must have felt safe at this range, must have thought their shields could handle any attack from this damaged relic. They were wrong. The shot pierced their shields and struck their main weapon array just as it was powering up for another blast. The resulting explosion ripped through the cruiser's hull, secondary detonations following as power conduits overloaded. Civilian ships entering jump point. Communications announced triumphantly, "They're away." The remaining enemy ships, seeing their cruisers destroyed and their prey escaped, began to withdraw. The Steadfast's bridge crew watched in exhausted amazement as the mighty Bright Horizon fleet retreated from their single ancient destroyer. "Damage report," Reed ordered, finally allowing himself to breathe normally again. "Hull breaches on multiple decks, shield generators at 20%, main power fluctuating," Wells reported. "But we're alive, sir. We're all alive." Reed looked at his tactical display, at the debris of 8 enemy ships floating in space around them. Not bad for an obsolete patrol ship. "Send a message to Fleet Command," he ordered. Tell them the Steadfast sends its regards. And we'll be needing those repairs after all." 2 weeks after the battle, the Steadfast limped into Victory Station's repair dock. Its hull bore new scars, patches of armor blackened and torn from enemy fire. But it moved under its own power, proud despite its wounds. As the docking clamps engaged, a crowd had gathered in the observation deck. Word of the ship's impossible victory had spread through the fleet. Reed stood on his bridge, watching the repair crews swarm around his ship through the viewport. The last 2 weeks had been a blur of emergency repairs, debriefings, and endless questions from Fleet Command. Wells hadn't left engineering during the entire journey back, nursing their damaged systems along. "Captain," Cooper called from his station, "Admiral Thompson is requesting permission to come aboard." Reed straightened his uniform. "Grant permission. Have Wells meet us in the main conference room." The Admiral arrived with a full entourage of technical specialists and fleet officers. Reed noticed how they all stared at the Steadfast's old-style corridors, their eyes lingering on the exposed conduits and physical control panels. They weren't looking with dismissal anymore, but with curiosity. In the conference room, Wells had set up a detailed presentation of their weapon modifications. She stood proudly beside her diagrams and data readings, dark circles under her eyes, but her spine straight. The Admiral's technical team leaned forward as she explained the frequency matching technique. "Remarkable," Admiral Thompson said when she finished. "You turned the enemy's greatest strength into a weakness. Their reliance on quantum shields made them forget about basic physical defense. He turned to Reed. The footage from your battle has been analyzed by every tactical officer in the fleet. 8 enemy ships destroyed, 2 heavy cruisers disabled, and 50,000 civilians saved. The Steadfast is a good ship, sir, Reed replied simply. She just needed a chance to prove it. More than proved it, Thompson smiled. Fleet Command has ordered an immediate review of all our older vessels. We're refitting the entire reserve fleet with modified railgun systems based on your designs. The Bright Horizons expansion has stalled as they scramble to adapt their defenses. Wells spoke up. Sir, the frequency matching technique won't work forever. They'll develop countermeasures. Of course they will, Thompson nodded. But you've given us something more valuable than a single weapon. You've reminded us not to rely too heavily on any one technology. Sometimes the old ways are still useful. The Admiral's technical team wanted to begin detailed scans of the Steadfast's weapons immediately, but Thompson held up his hand. First, there's something else. He pulled out a data pad. New orders for the Steadfast and her crew. Reed took the pad, reading quickly. His eyes widened slightly. The Steadfast is being reassigned to the front lines, Thompson explained. We're forming a new tactical unit around her. 6 other ships of her class, all being refitted with your weapons. You'll be leading them, Captain. Sir, Reed looked up in surprise. The Bright Horizon thinks they know everything about us, Thompson said. They see our older ships and dismiss them as relics. Let's show them how dangerous that assumption can be. Your task force will strike at targets they think are safe, using weapons they think are obsolete. After the Admiral left, Reed gathered his crew in the ship's mess hall. The room was crowded. Every member of the crew pressed in to hear their captain's words. They'd been through hell together, survived against impossible odds. Fleet Command has given us new orders, Reed announced. They want us hunting bigger game. A cheer went up from the crew. But first, we're getting a full refit. New armor, improved power systems, and better targeting computers. They're not taking out our old controls, are they? Someone called from the back. There was worry in the voice. The crew had grown to trust their familiar systems. No, Reed smiled. They want to study how we do things the old way. Apparently, we've started a trend. Sometimes the tried and true methods are still the best. What about the railguns? Cooper asked. Are they replacing those? Actually, Wells spoke up. They want me to supervise the installation of similar systems on other ships. But the Steadfast keeps her original guns. They're part of her soul now. The crew dispersed to their duties, morale higher than ever. Reed walked through his ship's corridors, running his hand along the worn walls. The repair crews would fix the battle damage, replace the burned-out systems, but they wouldn't change the Steadfast's essential nature. She would remain what she had always been, a warrior, tested by time and combat. A month later, the Steadfast led her new task force out of dock. 6 other ships of her class flew in formation with her, their hulls gleaming with fresh paint, but their hearts old and strong. Their railguns had been modified according to Wells' designs, their crews trained in the old ways of space combat. On the bridge, Reed watched his tactical display as the ships moved into attack formation. The Bright Horizon had grown cautious since their defeat, clustering their ships for protection, doubting their invincibility for the first time. Task Force reports ready, sir, Cooper said from his station. Wells stood beside him, monitoring the weapons systems she'd helped design. Send a message to all ships, Reed ordered. Tell them, the old guard is back. Let's remind our enemies why they should fear what they don't understand. The Steadfast's engines powered up, pushing the ship toward its next battle. It didn't matter that newer, more advanced vessels filled the fleet. The old destroyer had found its place again, leading the way into combat, proving that sometimes the best weapons were the ones your enemies had forgotten about. In the weeks that followed, the Steadfast and her task force became legendary among both human and alien forces. They struck from unexpected vectors. their antiquated weapons tearing through defenses designed to stop far more advanced attacks. The Bright Horizons expansion faltered, then stopped entirely as they were forced to rebuild their entire defensive doctrine. But more importantly, the Steadfast had sparked a change in how the fleet thought about warfare. New ships began incorporating old technologies alongside their energy weapons. Hybrid defense systems were developed, combining quantum shields with traditional armor. The best of both worlds, the wisdom of age married to the power of innovation. And through it all, the Steadfast sailed on, its scared hull and weathered crew a reminder that true strength comes not from having the newest weapons, but from knowing how to use what you have. In the end, that was what had saved 50,000 lives and changed the course of a war. Not advanced technology, but the courage and creativity of a crew who believed in their ship when no one else would. The old destroyer had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. But in its finest hour, it had proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one your enemy thinks is harmless. The Steadfast had earned its place in history, not as a relic, but as a revolution.